The bowl hit the tile floor and shattered like a verdict. Rice porridge spread across the white marble in a slow, pale flood. The sound cracked through the kitchen like something irreparable. Every single person stopped. 31 line cooks, prep staff, and servers went rigid at the exact same moment. Ladles hung suspended mid-air. Steam curled up from abandoned pots nobody dared tend. Not a single breath. Not one. Third one this week. The voice came from just inside the doorway. Low, almost conversational. No one turned to look. They didn't need to. They already knew. Kwon Ji-hun walked into the kitchen the way powerful men walk into rooms they own. Unhurried, unannounced, and unmistakable. He was broad, over 6 feet, with the kind of stillness that either meant total calm, or the second before something catastrophic. His suit was charcoal gray, impeccably cut, the kind of fabric that felt like money you'd never touch. Gold rings on 4 fingers. A tattoo that began somewhere beneath his collar, and ended somewhere below his jaw. His face was all hard angles and contained displeasure. A jaw like carved teak, eyes like polished obsidian, a mouth set into the specific flatness of a man who had expected better, and stopped being surprised by disappointment. This was the man who owned Hasen Restaurant. The man who owned most of Itaewon. The man who, if the street whispers were believed, and they usually were, owned the underground of Seoul the way some men own second homes. Casually. Completely. The head chef stood at the center of the wreckage, apron soaked, his hands shaking at his sides. Sejangnim, please let me try once more. I can. You're done. Not shouted. Not even said hard. Just placed down like a finality, the way you'd set a key on a table and walk away. The chef's face went through several things in quick succession. Disbelief, protest. The dawning humiliation of a man with 2 Michelin stars being dismissed before a room full of his juniors. He had cooked for ambassadors. He had trained under a French master, who screamed like opera. None of that had prepared him for 2 quiet Korean words in a kitchen in Itaewon. Sir, if you would just give me the chance to. Kwon Ji-hun's head turned. Slow. Deliberate. The chef stopped talking immediately, the way animals stop moving when something with more predatory intelligence enters their field of vision. I said you're done. 3 men in dark suits materialized from nowhere and flanked the chef, steering him toward the service entrance with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this before. His voice trailed behind him down the hallway like a forgotten song. And then a door shut and there was nothing. The kitchen held its freeze. Ji-hun walked toward the shattered bowl on the floor. He crouched down, designer suit and all, and looked at it the way someone looks at an object they've been trying to recreate from memory and keep failing. Not fury. Something older. Something that lived deeper in the chest than anger. It crossed his face like a shadow crossing water, and was gone before anyone could name it. Almost anyone. He rose. The mask returned without seam. His gaze traveled the room methodically, cataloging, assessing, and then it stopped. Near the back counter, beside the rice station, a woman stood with a wooden spoon still raised from stirring, watching him with the kind of steady, unhurried attention that no one else in the room possessed. She was Nigerian British, you could tell by the specific quality of her composure. Not trained stillness, which looks like suppression, but genuine groundedness, which looks like a person who has decided they are exactly where they are. Her chef's whites were spotless. Her locks were wrapped and pinned under her cap. There was a burn scar along the inside of her left wrist, thin, silvered with age, the kind you get when you have spent real time around fire. She was not looking away. She was not flinching. She was simply watching him back. Ji-hun pointed. You knew. Adiz Obi lowered the spoon slowly. For months, sir. Name. Adiz Obi. He walked toward her. The kitchen staff between them found reasons to be elsewhere, pressing themselves to the edges with the instinctive, unanimous movement of people who understood proximity to power had costs. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she could smell the cedar and black pepper of his cologne, and something underneath it, something she didn't have a word for yet, like wood smoke in an empty room. You weren't afraid, he said. Not a question. Was I meant to be? Something shifted behind his eyes. Brief gone. Everyone else was. Adiz set the spoon down carefully on the counter. I've been in scarier kitchens. The room went absolutely airless. Ji-hun looked at her for a long, motionless moment, And then the edge of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. A muscle memory from a face that had once known how. Is that right? Still not a question. He studied her with the unhurried precision of a man used to reading situations quickly and filing every detail. Her hands steady. Her breathing even. Her gaze, direct without being combative. Like someone who simply didn't have space in her nervous system for performance. Cook for me, he said. Tonight? Now. Xiaoliangtang. Oxbone broth. You know it. Yes. He leaned the smallest amount forward, and his voice dropped, not to something intimate, but to something that made the air feel different. Something almost frantic beneath the command. The tone of a person who has been asking for something for a very long time, and cannot let themselves ask directly. I love it thick. Rich. The way the collagen coats the back of your throat. Like the broth has been sitting for hours. Not watery. Not thin. Thick. A pause. Understood. A small prickle moved along the back of her neck, but she kept her face even. Understood. He straightened. Don't make me regret this. He turned and walked back toward the private dining room. His men fell into formation behind him like shadows that had learned punctuality. The door closed. The kitchen erupted in whispered chaos. Did you see how she looked at him? 3 chefs in a week, 3. She's going to be the 4th, I'm telling you. Someone behind her muttered lower than the rest. He's been like this for 2 years. Since his grandmother died. Always the same dish. Always. Same result. Adiz heard it all. She said nothing. She moved to the main prep counter and started pulling ingredients with the systematic calm of someone who does their thinking through their hands. Ox bones soaking. Water cold start. Onion, garlic, ginger. Fresh noodles. But her mind was elsewhere. 3 chefs in a week. 2 years. The way he'd crouched over that broken bowl. Not the posture of a man who was angry. The posture of a man who was searching. Stop, she told herself, firm as a door closing. You didn't come to Seoul to read a broken man. You came here to disappear for a year, cook somewhere no one knows your name, and figure out who you are when you're not performing recovery for everyone back home. This is a job. He is a client. You are a chef. She knew this about herself, this pull. Her counselor in London had named it without blinking during their last session before Adiz had quietly let the appointments lapse. You move toward damaged people like they're your responsibility, Ada. You mistake needing to be needed for love. You'll keep walking into burning buildings thinking you can carry everyone out. You can't. She was standing in a kitchen in Seoul, preparing a dish she'd learned from an old woman in Brixton who had grown up in Busan, organizing ingredients with her hands while her mind circled a man she'd known for 3 minutes. She started cooking. Adiz carried the bowl to the private dining room herself. The other staff watched her leave the way people watch someone walk toward something they can't be warned about. Ji-hun sat at the head of the long table alone. His jacket was off, folded across the back of the chair beside him. His forearms rested on the table, tattooed, corded, the sleeves of his shirt rolled to the elbow. He looked different without the jacket. Not smaller, but more present somehow, like the architecture of the room had shifted slightly. She set the bowl down. Xiaoliangtang. As requested. He picked up the spoon. Stirred it once. Let the steam rise. Took a mouthful, held it, swallowed. Something happened in his face that she wasn't meant to see. Not satisfaction. Not critique. Recognition shot through with something that looked like pain. The expression of someone who has found a door they thought was sealed and has discovered it still opens. And does not yet know if that is mercy or cruelty. He set the spoon down. Who taught you? Not a question either. He had a habit of delivering questions as statements. She was noticing. Like certainty was the only register he operated in. Even when what he was asking was deeply uncertain. A woman in London. She had a small restaurant in Brixton. Korean British. She'd lived there 40 years but cooked like she'd never left Busan. Something in his expression shifted. Subtle. A tightening in the jaw. A stillness in the eyes. Her name. Adiz paused. Yoonhae-soo. She passed 8 months ago. Kwon Ji-hun went very still. Not the performed stillness she'd seen from him in the kitchen. This was the stillness of a man who has taken an unexpected blow to a place he considered fortified. His hands on the table pressed flat against the wood, as if he needed the anchor. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "I see." He took another spoonful. Then another. He ate slowly, deliberately, like someone walking through a house they grew up in and no longer live in, pausing at each room. "Close," he said finally. "Close to what?" His eyes lifted to hers, and she saw past the stone's surface into whatever lived below it. It was not just pain. It was old pain, the kind that has been managed privately for years, kept in neat shape, carried without complaint. Something I have been trying to find again for a long time. He finished every drop of the broth, set the spoon down with finality. "You'll cook for me again tomorrow?" "Yes, sir." "Adiz." His voice stopped her at the door. Something strange in the way he said her name, like he was still deciding whether he had the right to. "Don't disappear." She turned. His face was already closed again, the mask back without a seam. "I won't," she said. She stood alone at the sink for a long time after, hands in warm water. Yunhesu, his grandmother. His mother. Someone who mattered enough to hollow him out this quietly, this completely. Her counselor's voice came back clean and direct. "You'll keep walking into burning buildings." She dried her hands. She was already thinking about tomorrow's broth. 3 weeks passed. Adiz became Kwon Ji-hun's personal chef. Every evening at 7:30, she prepared his meal. Every evening. She brought it to the private dining room and stood in silence while he ate. Every evening, he dismissed her with the same 2 words. "Come back." She began to learn his patterns the way you learn the weather patterns of a place you've decided to stay in even though it wasn't the plan. He always ate the radish. He never touched the shiitake. He drank 1 glass of makgeolli per meal, poured himself, never refilled. When the food was exactly right, his shoulders dropped by almost nothing. A millimeter of released tension, claimed back almost immediately like he'd accidentally let something show. She noticed the way he watched her when he thought she was focused on something else. She noticed herself noticing. "Stop it," she told herself. "You are doing it again. You can feel yourself doing it, and you are doing it anyway." This was the pattern. She had come halfway around the world specifically to break it. She had left London with 2 suitcases and a letter of resignation from the Royal Free Hospital, where she had spent 6 years as a trauma nurse until the accumulated weight of everyone she couldn't save had become a thing she could no longer lift. She had told herself, no more hospitals, no more broken people, no more choosing to stay in places that cost her everything because leaving felt like abandonment. And here she was, cataloging the shoulder tension of a Korean crime boss, and thinking about the depth of his grief. Kwon Ji-hun was not a hospital. Kwon Ji-hun was a man who ran half of Seoul's underworld with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of someone who had never been told no by anything that mattered. She needed to remember that. Cook the food. Accept the salary. Keep the distance. She was catastrophically bad at keeping distance. That Thursday he had a dinner. 8 men in expensive clothes filling the private dining room with overlapping conversation, and the particular ease of people who exist in structures that give them no reason to be uncertain. Adiz served them wordlessly, invisibly, the way she'd learned in London from a restaurant where the floor staff were trained to be felt but not seen. One man at the far end of the table made her uneasy. Young, mid-20s, overdressed in the way of someone trying to signal more authority than they had. His eyes kept sliding to Ji-hun's glass, not with the casual attention of a guest following the host's lead, with the focused, almost physiological tension of someone waiting for something specific. Every time Ji-hun reached for the glass, the young man's shoulders rose. Every time Ji-hun drank, they fell. She filed it away somewhere precise. She was at the washing station when the dining room went wrong. Shouting. A crash that meant furniture, not crockery. Then screaming. The particular pitch of people who are afraid and don't have anywhere to put it. She was through the door before she'd made the decision to move. The long table had been overturned. Crystal and porcelain were scattered across the floor like shrapnel. The 8 guests were scrambling backward against the walls, faces drained of every color. And Kwon Ji-hun was on the floor, his body seizing in violent, arching contractions, his spine lifting entirely off the tile, foam at the corners of his lips, his eyes rolled back to the whites. Ambulance. Now someone was saying, he's dying. His bodyguards, 3 of them, men who looked like they had done things in this life that would not be discussed, were standing completely still. These were men whose composure was their primary professional asset. They were frozen. But Adiz had spent 6 years in the trauma unit of one of London's busiest hospitals. She had intubated in corridors. She had held arterial wounds closed with her hands. Her nervous system had been drilled out of panic and into function. She was already on her knees. "Move," she said to the nearest bodyguard, and he moved. She tilted his head, cleared his airway, swept foam away with practiced fingers. Checked his pulse. Present but frantic, a heart in crisis. She looked up. What did he drink? Someone tell me what was in the glass. Now, he said it tasted wrong, said an older man against the wall, voice fractured. Metallic. He said metallic just before. Metallic. Rapidon sit. Convulsions before loss of consciousness. A neurotoxin, and a fast-acting one, designed to kill before the body could respond. Emergency services, suspected acute poisoning, neurotoxic agent, adult male, severe systemic shock. She kept working as she spoke, turning him to his side, keeping the airway clear, monitoring the heartbeat beneath her palm. Stay. Stay with me. Don't do this. Don't you dare. His convulsions began to slow. His breathing steadied into something that was still frightening, but no longer catastrophic. She caught movement at the edge of the room. The young man, the one with the watching eyes, sliding sideways toward the service door with the careful, unhurried movement of someone hoping not to be noticed. Him, she said flatly. Don't let him leave. The bodyguards finally moved. 2 of them had the young man against the wall before he reached the door. The third was opening the front entrance for the paramedics, who arrived with the specific speed of people who had been called by someone who knew what they were describing. She handed over care with clinical precision. Airway status, pulse rate, suspected agent, timeline. And then she stepped back and her hands started shaking. 6 years of memories hit at once. The stab victims. The overdoses. The children. The night she had gone to the hospital bathroom at the end of a 12-hour shift, sat on the floor, and understood with total clarity that she had nothing left to give and hadn't for a long time. The night she had quit. She had run to the other side of the world to get away from this. Juhun's head of security, a man named Byung-cheol who had been introduced to her only as the man she was to call if anything happened that she could not handle, came to stand beside her. You saved his life. I reacted. You reacted when 17 trained men did nothing. He was quiet for a moment. You kept him alive. She looked at her hands and said nothing. Seoul National University Hospital, private wing, 4th floor. Adiz sat in the hallway in her stained whites, looking at the wall opposite without processing anything on it. 2.5 hours since the ambulance. He was stable. Critically so, but stable. She should leave. Every rational, self-preserving part of her said it plainly. You have done your part. You saved a man's life. That is complete. That is finished. Go home and make tea and go to bed, and tomorrow call the recruiter and ask about that position in Osaka, because this job has run its natural course. She did not move. Byung-cheol came and sat beside her with 2 cups of vending machine coffee. He sat like a man accustomed to hospital hallways, patient, contained. He told her what the doctor had said, that without her intervention, the airway would have closed before any ambulance arrived. She nodded. I used to be a trauma nurse, she said. Royal Free. London. 6 years. He glanced at her. Why did you stop? Because I got to a place where the ones I lost were louder than the ones I saved. She turned the paper cup in both hands. I couldn't separate them anymore. Every face I couldn't bring back was still there in the morning. I needed them to stop. Byung-cheol was quiet. Then, can I tell you something about him? She looked up. Yoon-hae-soo. He said the name with the careful weight of someone handling something that matters. She was his grandmother. His father's mother. She raised him for 4 years after his father left, before he went back to his mother. They were close in the way of people who understand each other without explanation. He stared into his cup. He became what he became by the time he was 23. She told him plainly what she thought of it, and when he wouldn't listen, she left. Moved to London. Opened the restaurant. A pause. They didn't speak for almost 9 years. Adi's chest tightened with the particular sensation she recognized as the onset of being too far in. He found his way back to her 3 years ago. She was already ill. He flew to London every month for the last year of her life. Sat with her in the kitchen because that was where she was most herself. Byung-cheol's voice was even but deliberate. She cooked for him when she had the strength. Xiaoliangtang, always. That was the dish she made when she forgave him. Not with a speech. With food. She placed the bowl down in front of him, and that was the whole of it. He paused. She passed 8 months ago. Since then, he has been trying to taste that forgiveness again through every chef he hires. Adi sat with it. Yoon Hae-soo, who had cooked for a woman with sad eyes and a suitcase full of someone else's grief, and taught her that food was the most direct language. The same hands that had made the same bowl for her own grandson in the last months of her life. Out of every cook in this city, it was Adi she had chosen to teach. You move toward damaged people like they're your responsibility. She could hear her counselor as clearly as if she were in the next chair. Could feel the soft, immovable firmness of it. She was already past the place where warnings functioned. A nurse appeared from the room at the end of the hall. He's awake. He's asking for the chef. Kwon Ji-hun looked reduced against the white of the hospital room. Not small. That wasn't the right word. He was constitutionally incapable of small, but stripped. All the architecture of authority absent. Tubes and monitors and the antiseptic light, making him look like a person rather than a presence. His eyes were open, and they found her the moment she came through the door. You stayed. You asked for me. I wasn't sure you would. He studied her face with the directness that she'd stopped finding unsettling. I almost didn't ask. I almost left about 4 times, she said. The faintest shadow of something moved across his mouth. What stopped you? She pulled a chair close and sat down without asking whether she should. I haven't figured that out yet. The heart monitor kept its rhythm between them. Byung-cheol told me, she said. About your grandmother. Something shuddered in his expression, and then deliberately, visibly, he chose to let it open. Like unlocking a room he'd been standing outside of. Then you understand why no one could get the dish right. You weren't looking for a chef who could cook it. You were looking for someone who already knew it. He stared at the ceiling. She taught you. She saw something in me she wanted to tend. Adiz paused. She always did that, she said. People with quiet wounds. She could see them from across a room. His jaw tightened. She saw it in me too. When I was 15. Before everything. A long pause in which something worked itself out across his face. I spent years thinking it was weakness in her. The way she took people in. I thought it made her foolish. His voice was lower. I understand it now. Adiz said nothing. Waited. Why did you fight for me? Not a question. An asking beneath a statement. You know the things I am. The things I've done. On that floor, working to keep you breathing, you were not Kwon Ji-hun, the crime boss. She met his eyes. You were just a man who was dying. My grandmother's friend taught me that every person who is still breathing is still worth fighting for. She held his gaze. She was not wrong. Something in his face fractured open, brief and unguarded. The way things fracture when a long-held thing finally shifts. He blinked it back. But she had seen it. Come back to the restaurant, he said. When I'm discharged. Why? Because you knew her. Because the way you cook is the way she cooked. And because I'm not ready to stop grieving her, and I'm not able to do it alone. He paused. And because in 2 months at Hasten, you are the only person who has looked at me without wanting something. Okay, she said simply. She walked back through the hospital corridor already telling herself this was professional. A cooking arrangement. A continuation of employment. Nothing more. She did not believe a word of it. Welcome to Gloria Afrokorean Stories, where African warmth meets Korean heart. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss what comes next. To everyone who has been here from the beginning, I see you, I love you. Drop a comment, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's go back to the story. 2 weeks after his discharge, Kwon Ji-hoon appeared at Haesun on a Sunday afternoon when the kitchen was quiet, and the restaurant was closed. Adiz was doing inventory. He sat at the bar with a glass of water and asked, with the specific carefulness of a man who does not ask for things easily, if she would teach him to cook. She said yes. She said it immediately, before she'd properly processed it. She heard her counselor's voice. She said yes anyway. He was genuinely impressively terrible. He treated a knife like it had done something to him personally. He burned the garlic twice in the same pan in the same session. He oversalted the broth so decisively that it was almost impressive, and then stared at the pot with the expression of a man experiencing a very specific personal betrayal. "This is not working," he said. "You're forcing it. Ease off." "I don't ease off. I noticed." He looked at her sidelong. No heat in it. Just the specific discomfort of a man encountering a limitation he has no established framework for managing. She came to stand beside him, repositioned his grip on the spoon, adjusted the angle of his wrist. His body went slightly still at the proximity, not pulling away, but registering. She felt it too. The warmth of him beside her, the close quiet of the empty kitchen, the strange and specific intimacy of standing this near to a man who frightened everyone else and somehow not being frightened. This is the pattern, she thought very clearly, looking at his hands over hers. This is the exact shape of it. "You should be afraid of me," he said, out loud suddenly, as if he'd been thinking it for a while and said it before he could decide not to. "I'm not. I know." He didn't move. "I can't determine whether that's your courage or your flaw. Could be both." He turned to look at her directly. "Does nothing unsettle you?" "Many things unsettle me." She stepped back, reclaimed the reasonable distance of a professional. "I just don't tend to show it." "Why?" She considered that. "Because I grew up in a house where being unsettled meant becoming a burden. So I learned to contain it." He was quiet. "We have that in common." He set the spoon down. "Everyone I have ever known has been afraid of me, or has wanted something from me. You look at me like I'm a man who cannot manage simple broth. You are a man who cannot manage simple broth. You know what I mean." "Does it bother you?" she asked, being seen plainly. The long pause that followed was the most honest thing he'd given her. "It makes me uneasy," he said at last. "I have built my entire life around being unreadable. You look straight through me and you don't react the way anyone else does, and I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything with it," she said, and went back to the broth. She didn't see the way he watched her after. The particular quality of a man's attention when he is trying to convince himself of something, and the effort is beginning to fail. The problem with Adiz Obi, the specific, relentless, maddening problem, was that she made him feel things he had no architecture for. Ji-hoon had spent 16 years building a self that did not require witness. He was not unfeeling by temperament. He had chosen to become functionally unreachable because the alternative, being someone who needed things, who could be reached, who could be hurt, had shown him early what vulnerability cost. He was cold by construction, not constitution. Every wall precisely built, regularly maintained. His grandmother's death had come the closest to dismantling everything. He had carried it the way he carried all things. Inward, contained, alone. That, at least, was familiar. He knew how to grieve in private. He had done it before. This was different. 3 weeks into the cooking lessons, he called her into the private dining room after service, told her she was being promoted to head chef with immediate effect, and told her the lessons were done. Too distracting. Too undefined. He needed clarity of arrangement. He watched her face as he said it. She didn't flinch. Didn't look wounded. She looked at him with that level, unimpressed steadiness that had been quietly dismantling him for weeks, and said, "You're lying. I'm restructuring a professional arrangement. You're frightened." He met her gaze. "Of what?" "Of what's happening in that kitchen every Sunday." She took one step toward him. No aggression in it. Just the terrifying calm of someone who has decided to say the true thing. Of letting someone pass the outer walls and not being able to control what comes next. He had no answer that was not itself a confirmation. I'm not asking you to become someone different, she said. I'm asking you to stop pretending you feel nothing. Those are not the same request. You don't know what you're asking for. Then tell me. He looked at her for a long moment. Chose the wall. There's nothing to tell. This is what I am. And you're the head chef of my restaurant. Let's keep it at that. The words landed. He watched her absorb them without theatrics. She said okay and she left. He stood alone in the private dining room for a long time afterward. He had made her smaller than she was in order to protect himself. It was the first thing he'd done in years that made him feel genuinely ashamed. She came back the next morning. Was impeccably professional. Treated him with exactly the correct respectful distance of a senior chef to an employer. It was miserable. He watched her from the kitchen pass for 3 weeks and told himself this was right. Then one Tuesday night he came through the corridor near the dry storage and heard her voice, low and private, speaking in English on the phone, thinking she was alone. I know, Kayamaka, I know. I'm doing it again. A pause. No, I know what you're about to say. He's not different, he's just, no, listen. I don't know if I'm here because I chose it or because I literally cannot help myself, and I don't know which answer is worse. She hung up. Stood there a moment with her hands still on the wall. He stepped out of the shadow. She startled, then composed herself in the space of a single breath. What I said, he began. Stopped. Started differently. 3 weeks ago. The way I ended things. He kept his eyes on hers. Elite. You were right. I was frightened, and I made you smaller than you are because it was easier than admitting that. That was wrong. He paused. I am sorry. She studied him with that particular quality of attention she had, the kind that felt like being genuinely seen. Do you know what's interesting? She said finally. Everyone who knows your name is afraid of you. But the thing you actually do that damages people has nothing to do with any of that. She looked at him steadily. It's that. What you just described. You go somewhere inside yourself when things get real. And then you punish the other person for having gotten close. He had no defense because she was precisely right. I have a pattern, she said. I stay too long. I have done it everywhere my whole life. I stayed at the Royal Free 2 years after it was destroying me, because leaving felt like abandoning everyone who needed me. I know I'm doing it here. She looked at him directly. The only reason I haven't walked is because I genuinely can't tell yet whether this is the pattern, or whether this is something else. And that difference matters to me. How do you tell them apart? He asked. I'm still working that out. A silence settled between them in the corridor, neither hostile nor comfortable, just honest. Let me learn, he said finally. Not as your employer. Not as anything professional. He paused, and the difficulty of what he was saying was visible in the set of his jaw. Teach me her recipes. Let me learn what I should have learned when she was here, and I was too proud to ask. And let me figure out how to become someone who is worth the way you look at me. Adiz was quiet for a long moment. You don't get to ask me to stay and then disappear behind the wall when it gets uncomfortable, she said. That's the condition. If you pull away, you tell me why. No more silence dressed up as professionalism. Agreed. And I'm not here to fix you. I know. I mean it. I know you mean it. He held her gaze. I don't want to be fixed. I want to fix myself. I'm asking you not to leave while I do. What came after was not easy, but it was real. He told her things he had not said out loud. He told her about his grandmother leaving, about the decade of silence that had followed, about what he had built in that absence, the acquisitions, the consolidation, the expansion of everything that could be commanded because command was the only intimacy he'd been shown. She told me she raised me to protect people, he said one evening, not quite looking at her. Not to own them. I told her they were the same thing. He turned his hands over on the counter. I was 23. I believed it. Do you still? She asked. Quiet for a long time. No. But I kept building the same structures anyway, because stopping meant accounting for everything I'd already done. She told him her own real version. The pattern. The staying. The specific way she had confused being needed with being safe. My counselor said it's a form of control, she said. If I can fix someone, they won't leave me. It sounds like the opposite of what it is, but that's how it works. She looked at him. I'm telling you this so you know. I've been watching myself closely since the first week. And what are you seeing? I'm seeing that the difference between the pattern and something real is whether I'm trying to change you or trying to be beside you. And I think this is the second one. But I'm making sure. He nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it so I don't lie to myself. Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked, briefly, like admiration. That's the most Adiz Obi thing you've ever said. Don't make it charming. Too late. A month after the poisoning, he cooked for her. She arrived at the penthouse to find him behind the counter with a smear of flour on his forearm, and the expression of a man who had committed entirely to something, and was only now fully understanding what he'd signed up for. He made her a jjigae. Too much gochujang, and the tofu was slightly overcooked, and yet the care with which it had been assembled was unmistakable in every bowl. His face when she took the first spoonful and said it was good. Something opened in him so completely that she had to look down at the bowl for a moment. The relief. The hunger for approval so visible and so undefended that it told her more about his life than everything he'd said in words. This was a man who had been withheld from, who had learned early that warmth was conditional, who had spent decades behind walls because the alternative had cost too much. This is real, she thought, quietly and without ceremony. And it might still also be the pattern. And I think both things can be true. Why did you become a nurse? He asked over the meal. My mother died when I was 12. My grandmother raised me. She got sick when I was 16, and I took care of her until the end. She paused. I wanted to fight for other people the way I'd fought for her. But you couldn't save everyone. No. And the ones you lost, they accumulated. Yes. She looked at the food. Every face stayed. Every family I had to tell. There came a point where the weight of them was louder than anything else. He reached across the table and took her hand. He held it the way someone holds something they're not sure they're allowed to hold yet. I've been carrying mine so long I stopped feeling its weight, he said. And then you arrived and suddenly I can feel it. Which means I can also choose to put it down. Only you can do that. I know. That's what makes it. He looked at their hands, terrifying. Choosing to change means you have to look at what you've been. I've been looking at it. I'm looking at it right now. He met her eyes. I'm afraid of getting halfway there, and discovering I can't go further. Of trying and still being the same man in different clothes. Ji-hun. Gently. I'm not a destination you either reach or fail. I'm a person at the table with you. She held his gaze. Stop making me into a performance. I'm right here. He looked at her for a long moment. Then something in his posture changed, not collapsing, but releasing. Like a door that had been braced finally, quietly, coming off the latch. Stay, he said. I'm already here, she said. 3 months after the poisoning, they had no name for what they were. Most evenings ended at the penthouse, talking, cooking badly and well, falling asleep on opposite ends of the couch, and waking up slightly less opposite. Then the night he came home with someone else's blood on his shirt cuff. She heard the door. She heard the way his footsteps were controlled in the manner of someone managing themselves very deliberately. She came out of the kitchen. He stood in the middle of the room, coat still on. The blood was at the cuff, small, dark. His face was the mask, the public one. You should go, he said. I'll call you a car. What happened? Nothing that concerns you. Ji-hun. There are parts of my life that will never be justifiable. His voice was measured, deliberate. Tonight is one of those nights. Go home. She looked at the blood. She had been not looking at this part. Had told herself she understood it in the abstract. Felt now, for the first time, the full weight of the particular reality of it. Someone had been badly hurt, on his direction, tonight, while she'd been in his kitchen learning his grandmother's recipes. Go, he said. Please. She picked up her jacket. She stopped at the door. Did they deserve it? Not accusation. She needed to know the actual shape of the thing she was choosing. A long silence. The man who handled the poisoning, he said finally. He'd been building the operation for 2 years. He had a list of further targets. People close to me. His voice was flat and even. Byung-cheol's daughter is on it. She's 9 years old. Adi stood very still. I'm not asking for your approval, he said. I'm giving you truth because you asked and you deserve it. She put her jacket down. She turned around. I am not okay with it, she said, clear and unhurried. I need you to hear that and not explain it away. I hear it. Good. She sat on the couch. Come and sit with me. He stood there. This man whom an entire criminal network moved around without friction. This man who had not, Adi suspected, ever been simply invited to come and sit by someone who wanted nothing from him except his presence. He crossed the room and sat beside her. And he told her everything. Not the considered, edited version she'd been receiving. The actual version. The 3 times he'd chosen cruelty when another option had existed. The man he had destroyed 2 years ago who had done nothing except remind him of his father. The structures of violence he had called protection because calling them what they were required a reckoning he wasn't ready for. He told her all of it and then he stopped, voice low. Something in his face that looked like genuine exhaustion from carrying it. He waited. She didn't run. I can't tell you it's okay, she said. Because it isn't, and I think somewhere you already know that, which is why you're saying it out loud. She looked at him directly. I don't think you came to me tonight for absolution. I think you're tired of carrying the weight of who you've been without anyone to witness it. A long pause. Yes. And I think you want something different. Yes. He looked at his hands. Not because you're asking. I've been able to see myself more clearly since you arrived. Before you, it was just the way things were. I couldn't get enough distance from it to look at it. He paused. You didn't fix me. You just turned the lights on. What are you willing to actually change? She asked. Concrete. Specific. What does a different life look like in 10 years? He was quiet for the longest silence she'd heard from him. The kitchen clock marked it. The restaurants, he said at last. That's what I want it to be. What she built. Something that feeds people. I've been using them as cover. He looked at the table. I want them to be the whole point. Then start there. It won't be quick. It won't be clean. I know. I'm not going anywhere, she said. She held his gaze. But I need you to stop lying to protect yourself. Not to the world. To me. I can try. That's all I'm asking. He kissed her. Not desperate. Not broken open. Slow. The kiss of a man making a deliberate choice and understanding precisely what it requires of him. Stay, he said. Be mine. Let me be yours. I don't know how to do this. Teach me your world, she said. And I'll teach you mine. We're at the climax now. Strap in. But first, if you've made it this far, you are genuinely one of the ones. Hit the like button, drop a comment below, and make sure you're subscribed to Gloria Afrokorean Stories because the ending of this one will stay with you. Let's go. The attack came 6 weeks later. Midnight. The first explosion shook the building and Adiz was upright before she was fully awake. The room dark, the alarm going, fire visible in the glass below. Ji-hun was already dressed, already armed, already at the bedroom door. Stay in this room. Lock it. Don't open it for anyone except me or Byung-cheol. What's happening? The Myung network. They've been watching for 2 months. His eyes were the emergency ones, the flat professional ones. Tonight they've decided I'm compromised enough to move on. Another explosion closer. She felt the building shake. Ji-hun. He turned. She crossed to him and he grabbed her face and kissed her, hard and not tender. The kiss of a man who cannot say what he's afraid of and has no time to find different words. Promise me you'll stay in the room. I promise. He was gone. She locked the door, barricaded it, crouched in the far corner of the room and listened to the sounds she could not stop hearing. Gunfire, screaming, 2 more explosions that made the walls vibrate, then silence, then more gunfire. She thought about London, about the specific exhaustion of loving a life that kept trying to destroy itself. She had run from that and ended up here. And here she was in the corner of a penthouse in Seoul listening to a war being conducted on the floors below. And she was not a bystander. She was the reason he was considered compromised. She was the thing they were using as evidence that he had gone soft. Is this the pattern? She asked herself into the dark between explosions. Or is this love? Both, she thought. It has always been both. The question is not whether to name it. The question is whether love is large enough to hold both things at once. 40 minutes. The gunfire stopped. Footsteps in the corridor. His knock. She opened the door. Ji-hun was being supported by Byung-cheol, his left side dark with blood, his face pale in the specific way of blood loss. She was across the room before she'd processed moving. Shoulder, he said before she could ask. In and out. Behind Byung-cheol, she saw a second figure being carried by two men. Young. Very young. Not moving. Who is that? Byung-cheol's face told her. Kim Ji-seo. He's 22. What happened? Ji-hun's voice was different. Stripped of the flatness. Something raw underneath. He stepped in front of me. He's been with me since he was 16. He looked at her. Is he? He's alive, Byung-cheol said. Barely. Ambulance is downstairs. She worked on Ji-hun's shoulder in silence, cleaned and dressed the wound, monitored his color. Her hands remembered without consulting her. When she finished, she sat back. Jizeo, she said. He's 22. I know. He's been with you since he was 16. I know, Adiz. That is not abstract. She looked at him steadily. That is a 22-year-old boy bleeding because of the world you built. I know. Something worked in his jaw. I know what it costs. I have always known. Then the transition you're building has to be faster, she said quietly. Every day you delay is another Jizeo. I need you to hear that not as criticism, as the condition. I hear it. Say it back to me like you mean it. Every day I wait is another cost, he said. I hear you. I will move faster. She took his hand, careful around the bandaged shoulder. I sat in that room tonight, she said. And I asked myself whether I could live inside this. Whether love is enough to hold the weight of what your world is. She held his gaze. I don't have a clean answer. I don't think I ever will. But I'm still here. And I need that to mean something to you. Not gratitude. Action. It means everything, he said. And I will show you. Not just words. She nodded. Jizeo, she said. When he recovers. I want to meet him. He looked at her. Why? Because he's 22. Because someone should ask him what he actually wants from his life. She held his gaze. Building something different means looking at all of it. Not just the operations. The people inside them. Ji-hun was quiet for a long time. You're asking me to look at things I have spent years making invisible to myself. Yes. And it's going to be hard. I know. He brought her hand to his lips and held it there. I love you, he said. Simply. Like a fact he'd been carrying and finally set down. I don't know how to do this. I want to learn. I love you too, she said. Don't make me sorry. I won't. A pause. I promise. She believed him. Not because she was hopeful in the naive way. Because she had watched him choose, slowly and imperfectly and at genuine cost, to become someone capable of making promises that were worth keeping. Kim Ji-seo survived 3 surgeries and 11 weeks of recovery. His mother did not leave the hospital for 12 days. Ji-hun paid every bill without being asked and visited twice a week without announcing it. Adiz met Jizeo on a Wednesday afternoon 6 weeks after the attack. He was thin and still, and had the expression of a person who has had a significant amount of time to reconsider things and has used it. He told me about you, Jizeo said. He said you kept him alive after the poisoning. He looked at his hands. He said you were why he was trying to build something different. Adiz considered her answer. No, she said. He was the reason. I just stopped letting him pretend he didn't want to. Jizeo was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what I want. He looked up. After this. I don't want to go back. Have you told him? Not yet. Tell him. He's learning to listen. She told Ji-hun that night. He sat with it for a long time, then made a call that ended in Jizeo being offered a position managing logistics for one of the restaurant group's supply chains. Legitimate work. A door opened by someone who had finally begun to understand the difference between protecting people and owning them. That was the moment Adiz felt the shift she'd been waiting to feel. Not in how she felt about him, but in how she felt about herself. She was not here because she could not leave. She was here because she had chosen to stay, and the choice had its own weight and its own dignity, entirely separate from compulsion. She called her old friend in London that night. Kayamika. I think I'm okay. Actually okay, not just surviving. A pause on the other end. That's new. Yeah, Adiz said. It really is. The proposal came 3 months after the attack. 3 months of Jihun meeting every week with legal advisors and business consultants, and the kind of professionals whose presence in his life a year ago would have been unthinkable. 3 months of slow, imperfect, genuine work. 1 month after Adiz had sat him down and asked the concrete question. I need to know this is real. Not for me. For you. What do you actually want your life to look like in 10 years? He had told her. She had believed him. Not because the answer was perfect, but because it was honest and it had cost him something to say. She genuinely did not know if she would say yes, which was a strange thing to think about her own engagement. But there it was. She had come this far by staying honest with herself. She was not about to stop now. She found the private dining room set with candles and a single chair beside his, and Jihun standing at the head of the table looking more exposed than she had ever seen him. He told her everything again, his grandmother, the years of silence, the decade of building walls, but differently this time. Not as confession. As history. The history of how he had become the man he was becoming. I love your stillness, he said. I love that you called me out every time I lied to protect myself. I love that you left when you needed to and came back when you chose to. I love that you told me the truth about your flaws because it made it safe for me to look at mine. He opened the box. I love that you cooked her food for me before you knew she was mine. Adiz's throat tightened. Marry me, he said. Not because you saved my life. Because you saw it was worth saving. And you have been showing me the same thing ever since. She looked at the ring. She heard her counselor's voice, the precise and careful words. You stay when you should leave, Ada. Every time. She thought about all the times she had stayed. And then she thought about the difference between this and those, the enormous, quiet, hard-won difference. That she had left when she needed to. That she had come back when she chose to. That she knew the distinction in her body now, not just in her head. I spent a long time afraid this was just me doing what I always do, she said. Jihun held her gaze. He did not fill the silence. I know myself well enough now to tell the difference, she said. This is not me staying because I can't leave. This is me staying because I want to. And it took me a long time to be certain of that. She looked at him. I needed you to know that's what you're getting. Someone who chose this. I know, he said quietly. I waited for you to be sure. You did. Yes. She smiled. Yes, she said. I'll marry you. His face transformed. The stone, the architecture, the carefully constructed distances. All of it gone at once. Just a man. Just relief and joy and love, all at once unguarded. You understand what you're saying yes to, he said, sliding the ring onto her finger. A man still in the middle of becoming. I know. She pulled him forward by his lapel and kissed him. So am I. 5 years later, Hasan had 3 locations: Seoul, Osaka, and London. Adiz was executive chef and creative director. She had gone back to London for the opening of the 3rd restaurant, and stood in Brixton for a long time outside the building that had been Yoon Jesus, which was now a flower shop, and said thank you to the air. Jihun's transition to legitimate operations had taken longer than either of them had wanted and been less clean than either of them had planned, because nothing real ever is either of those things entirely. The restaurants were no longer cover. They were the substance. Most of the shadows had gone. There were still things she didn't ask about on certain nights. There were still weights she held. But there was no pretending between them. No management of her perception. No truths held back out of protection. They had 2 children. A girl with her stubborn mouth and his precise thinking, and a boy who had inherited her warmth and his capacity for absolute stillness and deployed both strategically. They grew up between languages and cultures, and the specific generous love of 2 people who had chosen each other with full knowledge of the cost, and kept choosing. Every Sunday Jihun cooked. He had improved dramatically. He still overseasoned things. He still treated garlic with more aggression than was strictly necessary. He still occasionally produced something that required the diplomatic application of a lot of rice to make it edible. "Daddy's food is too spicy again," his daughter said one Sunday. "That's love, sweetheart," Adiz said. "Your daddy puts everything he has into what he makes. Sometimes love comes out a bit intense." Jihoon caught her eye across the table. She grinned. Their son, unbothered by the whole conversation, asked for more. Kim Jizyo came to Sunday dinners sometimes. He'd finished a business qualification, was managing supplier relationships for 2 of the restaurant locations, and had recently mentioned, quietly, that he was considering opening something of his own one day. Jihoon had already started asking around about available properties. He had told no one this. Adiz knew anyway. One evening, long after the children were in bed, they stood on the balcony in the dark and watched Seoul move below them. "Any regrets?" he asked. He still asked. Periodically, reliably. As if he needed to hear it confirmed at intervals, not out of insecurity, but out of the particular reverence of a man who cannot quite believe he has been given something this real, and wants to honor it by continuing to ask. Adiz thought about London. About running. About a small restaurant in Brixton, and an old woman with sad eyes who had seen something in her worth tending. She thought about the pattern, the real one, the deep one, and about the long and imperfect work of learning to tell it apart from a genuine choice. She thought about a dining room floor and a man dying and the part of herself she had thought she'd left behind in a hospital corridor in London. Rising to its feet without hesitation. She thought about all of it. "No regrets," she said. "Not one." He pulled her close and exhaled. Deep and settling, the exhalation of a man who has been carrying something a long time and has learned, slowly, to put it down. "I love you," he said. "More than I knew I was capable of." "I know," she said. "I love you too." "Even though," he began. "Because of," she said. "The whole thing because of." He kissed her forehead. "My grandmother would have argued with you constantly," he said. She loved people who argued back. "I know," Adiz said. She smiled. "She trained me." They stood there watching the city, the lights of Seoul burning below them like something that never goes entirely out. A British Nigerian chef who had learned the difference between staying and being held. A Korean man who had learned the difference between protecting and possessing. A grandmother who had planted something in both of them before she left, knowing exactly what it would become. A love that had cost them both something true. The best kind always does. And that, my beautiful people, is the end of tonight's story. Adiz and Jihoon. A love built from a shattered bowl and a poisoned glass, from a woman who cooked forgiveness into broth before she knew whose forgiveness it was, and a man who had to lose everything he'd built to understand what he actually wanted to become. If this story moved you, smash that like button. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment. I read every single one. Share it with someone who needs a story about the cost of choosing something real. And if you are not yet part of the Gloria Afrokorean Stories family, subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. New stories every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. This has been Gloria Afrokorean Stories, where African warmth meets Korean heart. Until next time, stay loved, stay whole, and stay hungry for stories that mean something. Goodbye, my friends.